the time has come to talk about this Samyang 135 F1.8 for Sony. I only got A6600, which is APS-C camera, and I got this Samyang for more than 2 weeks already. I got 6 photo shoots, so I got some crucial experience with it, and let's dive into the details together. On APS-C camera, this 135 is actually equivalent of 70 to 200 at the long end, wide open, because with APS-C camera, this thing is 202 millimeters f2.7, something like that. So actually this on full frame camera on long end produces kind of similar look, and I'm actually telephoto guy, that's why I got this one. Samyang 135 f1.8 for Sony E mount. I got this lens already for more than 2 weeks. I also have watched all the YouTube reviews before I bought it, but most of them were from Samyang ambassadors, so you may guess there is some bias to it, even if they try their best not to be biased. They are, because that's the human nature, that you bias if you got something for free. So I took a risk and I bought it, and actually I agree with most of the claims that were in all of the reviews I've seen, although I got 1 or maybe 2 small complaints. And as always, I bought this lens with my own money, so this is totally independent review, although might be the case that if you would like to buy it after watching my review, there might be an affiliated link down below. I got quite a good deal locally in Polish local reseller, so my final cost for this has been around 750 bucks or 690 euros, so not bad, I'd say. It's the cheapest 135 for Sony mount. And Sigma is like 30 to 40% more expensive, and Sony is twice as expensive in Poland, so a really good deal for what you got. What about the physical size and build quality? So regarding the size, it is almost the same size as Sigma 18 to 35. It's maybe a bit taller, but Sigma actually weighs more. It weighs 830 grams, and this without the hood weighs 772 grams. So it is lighter, and it feels lighter than a Sigma. It feels really light, probably because it's very big, but it feels hollow. It is like 2/3 of the Sony, or maybe even 3/5, so quite smaller and quite lighter, since Sony is 1140 grams without the hood, and this thing with the hood is 880 grams, and with the hood is a bit bigger, but still smaller than the Sony without the hood. But then compared with the Sigma 56, which is actually the APS-C lens, is much bigger. So with the APS-C body, as you can see in the intro, it looks kind of ridiculous. This hollowness gives a bit of a cheap feel to it, although the build quality is really good. Samyang went long way lately, and compared to older Samyang lenses, the build quality is much better. So there is almost nothing to complain about regarding the build quality. It feels really good. The focus ring is really well damped, although I got a feeling like dirt already got there, so it is a bit more noisy than before. My only complaint are these switches, which got really cheap feel to it, and it's quite hard to get into the middle position of the range limiter one, and they feel really flimsy. So my bet is if something breaks in this lens, that would be one of these switches. And actually this one is a custom switch, so you can program this via lens station, and actually you can buy this lens with a station, but since I already got the station, I bought the version without it, and I got it programmed for auto and manual focus. So actually my only complaint are these switches. which are quite flimsy, especially compared with the Sony 7200. Because it weighs only 880 grams, I can mount it into my APS-C body. I can swing my camera together with the lens on the strap on my shoulder without worrying that this would break the mount. And actually with the Sony I'm always worried, and I never mount the lens like that. I use the foot to mount the one of the anchors for the strap here, and it is strapped here to the lens and also to the body. And with this lens I used it connected directly to the body, which was swinging on my back, and there was no issue. That's a big pro, that this is so light. It seems that there is a rubber gasket, but it's really small, and you cannot feel it at some places under your finger, so I'm not sure how good it is in protecting this connection. I'd say that size and weight is really big pro of this lens. So I guess that's it regarding the build quality and the size. What about image quality this lens produces? So I can agree with all the reviews I've seen that this lens is very sharp corner to corner, even wide open. Autofocus is quite snappy and quite fast, but I do not agree regarding the autofocus areas, so bokeh. At least on my APS-C body, it does not seem very pleasing. Of course, it depends on the background, it depends what type of a background it is, how far the background is behind the subject, and how far from the sensor the background is. But in some cases, the bokeh is quite busy, quite choppy, and quite distracting, and I would show some examples. Maybe I'm too demanding, or maybe it's the case on APS-C body, because on full frame depth of field is shallower, so it's blurred much faster. I'd say that's the only complaint. So all photos showcased in this video are JPEG straight from camera. I shoot both RAW and JPEG, so I can always edit RAW later. But these JPEGs are without any color profile, so you can see the color cast of the lens. Another thing is that it is not that easy to autofocus on a really small subjects, but it's the same case with Sony 7200 on Sony APS-C, so on A6600. So it is not the case with the Samyang, but it's rather the case with the system. So with really small subject like a branch, a really small flower and stuff like that, I tend to focus manually on any lens on Sony APS-C, but it is worth noting that that's the case with this lens also. So for example, here I try to focus on this leaf, and actually it's a bit out of focus. The focus is somewhere here in front of this, so it got problems acquiring focus in that situation. Maybe it's not too contrasty for it, but when it acquires focus on a really small element, it's very sharp and detailed. So in this case it was acquired with autofocus, and yeah, and the background here is destroyed, and I do not have any complaints regarding the bokeh here, but there would be examples when I got. And here also, when you got something in focus, it is sharp, and this one has been acquired with autofocus. And what about infamous bokeh? Here maybe it's not that obvious, although there is a foliage behind, and I'd say that the out of focus area or the bokeh is not very pleasing, it's a bit distracting in this case. Maybe it's not that bad, but it is also not very pleasing in my opinion. Here, when you are closer to the subject, then I do not have any complaints, although not sure it's visible, but this specular highlight is not totally round, but there would be better examples. And yeah, it's very sharp, it is focused on the eye, and the image quality, I'd say it's very nice, it's very sharp. And here it is shot in 1.8 and you got a bit of a bubble effect on the specular highlights. There is also a dirt, so this is very prone to dirt on the front and back element, and actually the front element of this lens is like a dirt magnet, so the dirt is collecting there very easily, so you have to clear it quite often, especially if you shoot close up, because then you can see it as such points on your image. Then it's again closer, there is still this bubble effect, and this one is shot on Sony, so on Sony there is also a bit of the onion specular highlight, and you can see here the difference between 1.8 and 2.8 autofocus area, so like the specular highlights are almost twice as big. And here it is also Samyang versus Sony on 134, so you can see the difference between 1.8 and 2.8, and actually in that example maybe the bokeh on the Sony is more busy because it's less out of focus, but if you close to a subject and then the background is quite far away, it's not that annoying. And here you can see the specular highlights, and there is also this soft bubble effect. Not very annoying, but it is there. And here it's 2.8, and you can see that the specular highlights are not around anymore. And here, when this is wide open, you can also see it's not like perfectly around. You can see the aperture blades. For some reason, I thought that the aperture blades shouldn't be seen when lens is wide open, but they are here visible. And here, this was focused manually, and when you acquire focus manually, then this is very, very sharp lens, but it's quite hard to acquire focus on such subject which is very small in the frame. But in that case, the bokeh and autofocus area is very pleasing. Here you can agree and disagree, it's not that bad, and there is a grass in the background and some foliage, and that grass doesn't look that bad, but it's also not very pleasing. And here the example of chromatic aberrations, I do not see any, so that's the good news. And you can even use this as a wildlife lens if you want, but as you can see, if there are branches, that the bokeh is really busy. In my opinion, at least, it's very busy if you shoot branches which are out of focus. And for example, this photo also, I would complain a bit on the bokeh on how the autofocus areas are rendered on these branches and on the leaves on the ground. Here, when the subject is closer, then I don't have any complaints, but the background have to be much far away relative to the subject to eliminate this problem with the busy bokeh. Here also really nice autofocus area, really sharp photo. So, but here, in my opinion, this bokeh is quite busy. It's not that far away from the subject, so it is quite busy and choppy, in my opinion. So maybe it won't be a case on the full frame camera, but here on APS-C body it is a bit annoying, I'd say. So I wouldn't consider this shot as very pleasing. And here is the same case, especially on these branches and on the grass in the background is quite annoying. And here, especially this tree, it's very busy, and I'd say it's distracting. Maybe it's not the best photo in the world, but generally you got a subject here, but you are quite distracted by the bokeh here. Here, when I'm closer to the subject, it is much better. It's not that annoying, although it's not like the most pleasing bokeh of them all. And For example, this part is quite busy. And here, it depends what you like. It seems that for this branch is a bit busy. And here, for example, the branches from the bushes, this is quite annoying, I'd say. So maybe it depends on the taste, but for me it's not that pleasing. Here you got the specular highlights. The aperture is wide open, but you can still see some pointiness to the bokeh balls. It's not that obvious, but it is still there. Here I'd say also this is quite a busy background. There is a fence, so that fence got this busy look to it. I know maybe it looks bad for me, but and here you got examples of the specular highlights at different focus points. So and you can imagine that would be a subject. I haven't got a subject that day, but actually that would be the bokeh and your background when you shoot someone in front of actually this tree. So I'd say it's not that pleasing, especially compared to the Tamron 70-200 which I got in the past. That was with Tamron, it was just creamy as hell, and here is a bit busy. So this what it, and here also I moved towards the subject, and here I'd say this grass here and this tall grass is quite busy, and when I move further it becomes more and more pleasing, and then it is destroyed. So for example, here I do not have any complaints for the bokeh, here too, but here I'd say it's not that pleasing. And here also there were some bushes and some grass, and you can see some nervousness in the bokeh, although it's not that bad, but you can see. And here when you are close to the subject and the background is far away, I do not have any complaints. It is really nice and sharp, and the bokeh is very creamy, but you have to plan your shots. And here I'd say the autofocus area is a bit busy, especially when there are branches like that. Here is not that bad, but also not very pleasing, I say. So with these examples I wanted to showcase that autofocus area and the bokeh is not that pleasing in every case. Sometimes it's quite annoying with this lens. With the Sony 70-200 it's a bit better, I'd say. It's not that busy. I've been to the same locations lately, and I prefer some shots from the Sony over the Samyang, even though the Sony is slower by more than one stop and autofocus area is more focused. But maybe I'm demanding too more. Maybe I'm used to the Tamron 70-200 which I got before, and the bokeh there was much creamier and it was not busy at all. So maybe it's the reason why the lens is so light, because it got different optical formula than Sigma, for example. But regarding the bokeh, it is like the Sigma 135 is the best. Then there is a Sony, and then there is Samyang. And also you can see this in the reviews which are already on YouTube, that even though the reviewers are pleasing the bokeh, in some cases it is quite busy and annoying. Maybe that's my opinion, maybe you don't agree. You got that right. And I'm very interested on your opinion, if this bokeh is busy or not. Maybe I'm exaggerating this. So please comment down below if you agree or do not agree with my opinion on the bokeh in this lens. Generally regarding the bokeh, seems that the rule of thumb is that, so if you got some foliage in the background, especially when there is light coming through, or there are some branches, they would create not a very pleasing bokeh. Of course it depends from situation to situation, depends from the crop to crop. It also depends how far is the background relative to the subject you're shooting, because if the background is very far away, then it would be really blurred, but if it's closer, then it might be quite busy and distracting. Also, what I've seen regarding the autofocus areas, that specular highlights are not always around. Even wide open, you can see aperture blades. It is quite minimal, but you can see it that the bokeh balls, which are specular highlights in that case, are not round all the way. If you close it to 2.8, then it is very obvious that they are not totally round, although it got 11 blades, so it shouldn't be the case, but it is, even wide open. It's really minimal, but if you watch closely, you can see that the bokeh balls are not totally round. And I guess the bokeh quality is my only complaint regarding that lens, because it is very sharp and the focus is quite nice, although sometimes it happens that it works like Lumix camera, because the focus is hunting a bit back and forth before it acquires focus. It is especially visible in autofocus videos, which I would show later. You can see that before the lens acquires focus, then it is hunting back and forth, which does not happen on the, for example, on Sony 70-200. And I will use this lens 95% for photos, so it doesn't matter that much. Although even when you're shooting photos, you can see that this is hunting a bit before it acquires focus. I've seen some comparisons between this lens, Sigma and Sony, and I'd say that Sigma produces the best bokeh, although Sigma is the lamest in autofocus, is the slowest, and Sony got the best autofocus, but the bokeh is worse than on Sigma, but still better than this one. But it's 2 times more expensive, so although the choice is not that obvious, because this is the lightest of the 3. This one is 770 grams, Sony is 950 grams, so that means this is almost 200 grams lighter, and Sigma is 1130 grams, so which is exactly as Sony 70-200, so it is very heavy for 135, and Sigma is 40% more expensive than this one. So actually for me, that is the only choice, because it is the cheapest, also the lightest. The only con is for me the bokeh is not very pleasing, and the rest is on par with Sony, I'd say. So for me this is the best choice of the 3. But if you want the prettiest bokeh, because you photograph models which are not moving, then the Sigma would be the obvious choice. I also tested this lens in video, although I'm not planning to shoot that much with it, because even if you want to shoot a talking head video like this, you have to be like 8 meters from the lens, which is quite ridiculous. So for sure it's not a lens to shoot inside. I once tried to shoot inside and it was quite annoying, because the only thing you can get into the frame is just the face of your subject, nothing more, even if the room is like 10 meters long. So actually that's the lens to shoot outside. Maybe you could shoot sport events, but then you are limited to one focal length. It's not the best choice. So I tested this in video, and I'd say that it's not a good choice for moving subjects or subjects which moved into the frame and out of the frame frequently. It would be really nice lens for talking head videos or for interviews, although you have to be really far away, especially on APS-C body, to get the person into the frame. It is like 30 meters to get the whole person into the frame, so not the best choice. But regarding the autofocus, I would show the footage. I tested this in high-log gamma and also in S-log, because S-log is more demanding regarding autofocus, and there were times in S-log when this never focused at all on the face. The focus limiter has been set to full range, and when I jumped into the frame, I waited like 10 seconds and it never acquires my face. So it is a bit concerning, although if you are in focus already, then it keeps focus on the eye quite nice. Yet if you move out from the frame and you move back in, then it sometimes struggles to acquire focus, which is quite surprising, I'd say. And it is also the case in photo mode, but since you got limiters, you can at least mitigate this problem a bit. And in most cases, for photos, I shoot 1.5 meters to infinity. And actually, there is a debate that this got smaller minimum focus, which is 69 centimeters, which is 1 centimeter better than Sony. But actually, the stupid argument, you can see how close you can focus on the face with this. So if you consider this as portrait lens, that's the ridiculous climb. And it is still not a macro lens, so I'd say this 1 centimeter doesn't matter. So that shouldn't be the argument to buy this one over other two. I haven't shot any sharpness diagrams because I don't have one. I've been thinking about building one from the builds like a lot of channels got, but I'd say it's quite challenging to get the sensor totally perpendicular to the chart. And then if it is not totally perpendicular, you can get one corner or one side of the frame out of focus and it's not as sharp as it could be. So it might be misleading. I shot some contrasting targets in each corner and in the middle of the frame, and I've seen that this is very sharp lens. I've also checked the autofocus in photo mode when I was approaching the camera, first walking then running, and the success rate for walking has been between 50 and 63%, so not that good. And for running it was actually like 45%, so more photos were out of focus than in focus. But I've been shooting with the remote, so maybe the remote caused the delay, hard to say, but I guess it is quite same story as with any other lens on APS-C cameras. In my opinion, they are a bit crippled compared to the full frame Sony, so I guess that's the reason, although the A6600 is advertised as the best AF from the Sony lineup of APS-C, but I doubt it. And I mean, maybe it's the best, but it is for sure worse than A7 III or A7 IV in that regard. So plenty of photos were missed when I was moving fast towards the lens. But when I was shooting more stationary subjects, like even kids running, I think I missed maybe like 3 photos for 1000 of the photos. So in the real life scenarios, the autofocus is plenty enough, and I never experienced any problems with autofocus, except sometimes you can see there is a small hunting, but in most cases it happens when you shoot subjects other than people, because with people, when you got face and eye autofocus turned on, there is no problem with this hunting. I'm actually the rather telephoto guy. I prefer shooting telephotos than wider lenses. That's why I've chosen this one. I've been debating also Sigma 85 1.4, but I've chosen this one and I'm quite happy about this. It would be a telephoto on full frame, which I probably eventually get, and this is a real telephoto on APS-C because it's above 200 millimeters. I'd say that this lens together with the APS-C body is some kind of the Pursman 200 f2. For sure it's exactly the same as this lens on all full frame on a long end, but if you mount this on APS-C is 300 f4, so actually this is really nice portrait choice, and especially for shooting kids. If you shoot kids with telephoto like this, they tend to not register you as a photographer, and they behave naturally and they play naturally, so it's better to shoot with the telephoto than wider lens, because when you get closer to the kids they became to be nervous. So I'd say it's very good choice for portrait of the kids. Am I happy with the lens? I'd say yes. I guess I would choose that for outside poses over the 70-200. I mean that the 70-200 is more flexible because you can zoom in and out, but actually I prefer the look of this one. So even though that bokeh is sometimes more busy than on Sony, I guess the best scenario is to have both and you can switch. But if I have to choose one for the photo session, I would choose this one. And do I regret buying this one instead of Sigma or Sony? Not really, because it is the cheapest. I think for my budget is the only option. It got faster autofocus than Sigma. It is almost 30% lighter than Sigma. In my opinion, the choice is obvious in that case. And the Sony is totally out of my budget. And the autofocus areas on Sony are not that pleasing. They are better than on this one, but they are not as good than on Sigma, I'd say. But overall, the price to performance ratio, I think, is the best for this one. And the only thing which might be concerning is the quality of the switches or the actually quality of the optics, because there is a general opinion that over time Samyang lenses tend to decenter. They get blurrier over time. We'll see. I got smaller Samyang, so never experienced this before, but it might be the case. So for sure I would update if that would happen in the future. But generally I'd say it is very good lens, very sharp, no chromatic aberrations, quite fast autofocus, and especially for shooting people, it's a really good choice even on APS-C camera. And you have to judge yourself if you like or don't like the bokeh generated by that lens. I say in some scenarios it's not very pleasing, which means you have to more plan your shoot and when to place the model, when to place the background and what background to choose. But generally, in most cases, you would be probably fine, especially on the full frame camera, but on APS-C it's not that bad either. So let me know in the comments if you agree that the bokeh is busy and choppy at times, or you think that is very smooth and buttery. I guess that's it. Cheers. And the videos showing autofocus performance are shot in high-log gamma and then also in S-log, because S-log is actually harder to focus because there is less contrasty. So sometimes Sony cameras struggle with autofocus shooting S-log. And for the video autofocus, first scenario shot being backlit, which is also harder for the camera to focus. But actually it haven't got any problems focusing, although the focus been quite slow when I was jumping into and out of the frame. Sometimes it took like 3 seconds to focus, even in high-log gamma and in S-log. But actually it acquired focus in almost all cases. But sometimes when I was very close to the lens, it actually acquired focus on my nose instead of the eye. And that was quite weird, and it happened a few times. And then I also checked in a scenario when I've been in the shadow and the background been lit by sun, so actually the sun been quite contrasty and the focus wasn't that bad in high-log gamma, but in S-log actually there was few instances when it couldn't acquire focus at all. So I jumped into the frame and the camera never acquired focus. So that was quite surprising. But then I also tested this with Sony 70-200 and it wasn't much faster. Maybe it was more consistent, but in few examples it was as slow as Samyang, maybe even slower in S-log. So it is not a case with actually that lens, but focusing in S-log is quite slow on Sony cameras. And for high-log gamma, for sure, native Sony lens 70-200 is a bit faster than the Samyang. And you can see on some examples that the focus actually is pulsing, so it goes beyond the focus point and then comes back. There are a few examples of that, and also you can judge the bokeh quality on the video when I'm approaching the camera, and you can see how the background is changing, and you can judge yourself if the bokeh is pleasing all the time or the bokeh starts to be pleasing from some distance when I'm getting closer to the camera. For me, when I'm quite distant, in that case, this foliage is not very busy, but still there is some business to the out of focus area, and it, in my opinion, is not very pleasing. And also keep in mind that it might not be the case on the full frame camera because it would be more blurred, so it won't be that choppy probably. But on the APS-C, in some instances, I'd say that bokeh is not that pleasing, and actually there is a moment when I'm approaching camera that bokeh becomes pleasing and it becomes very creamy. But actually I guess that's the personal preference, so you can judge both on these example photos and on these example videos.